Hello everyone, I'm Kathy, and welcome to the Human Anatomy and Physiology class. Let us start our session with the introduction of human anatomy and physiology. At the end of today's session, you will be able to define anatomy and physiology, discuss the levels of organization in living organisms, state the various organ systems and their functions, describe the mechanism of homeostasis, list anatomical terms to describe body sections, body regions, and body cavities. Our slides contains the following: anatomy and physiology, levels of organization, organ systems and functions, homeostasis, and anatomical terms. What I'd like you to do is take a moment and look at the images. You probably mentioned something about structure, shape, color, uses or purpose. Do we all agree that image A is a house? Yes? Say you probably would like to add divisions inside the house. So you can have a living room, dining room, washroom, bedroom, and so on and so forth. Why? So that you can have a place to sleep, eat, take a bath, and do the rest of the stuff that you would normally do, right? We can use this house to easily associate the concept of anatomy and physiology. Anatomy is basically understanding the structure. From one look, we know that picture A is a house. Then if we want to have a place to sleep, we need to have a bedroom based on its purpose or function. In picture B, we have an X-ray image of a hand. Have you ever wondered on why our hands should have a series of bones connected with each other? Of course, if the shape or structure is just one palm size of bones, how can we use it to grip something? Hence, when you talk about anatomy and physiology, you will often hear the word form fits function. Now let's move to what is anatomy and physiology. Anatomy investigates structure of the body and body parts and its relationship to one another. So basically, you're answering the question, what does it look like? And it talks about structure. And then for physiology, it studies how the body and body parts work. There are two main areas that we have to look on. First would be, how does the body respond to external environment, and how does the body maintain a constant internal environment? So, physiology, normally we would ask how the body and body parts function. Now let's move to the relationship between anatomy and physiology. So remember that we said when we talk about structure, we are talking about anatomy. And when we discuss about functions, we are looking into physiology. And so one affects the other. So structure determines the functions that can be performed. Each of the different parts of our body have a job to do. Sum of all parts and their functions allow our body to operate as a whole. Then let's move to the level of organization in living organisms. As you can see from here, there are 6 levels. Number 1, we have a chemical level, and then 2, we have the cell level, 3 is the tissue level, 4, organ level, 5, organ system level, and 6, organism level. So in the chemical level, what we have are the atoms and molecules. So we have our carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, water, and bigger molecules like DNA. And so atoms combine to form our molecule. And then at the cell level, you have your muscle fibers, neurons, white blood cells, etc. molecules form organelles such as the nucleus and mitochondria, which make up your cells. And then for the tissue level, epithelial, connective, muscle, and nervous. And then you have similar cells and surrounding materials make up your tissue. And then from the tissue level, you have an organ level where you have your heart and your brain, and different tissues combine to form organs such as the urinary bladder. Then you have your organ system level where you have your cardiovascular system, nervous system, organs such as the urinary bladder make up the organ system. And then as humans, on an organism level, organ systems make up an organism. As you can see the diagram on the side, it's just basically moving from the chemical level all the way down to the organism level. I have tabulated here the organ system wherein you have your organ system, example of the components and the functions. We have the integumentary system. You have your cutaneous membrane, hair follicles, and your nails, which basically protects underlying tissues from injury and helps in temperature regulation. For the skeletal system, you have the bones and cartilage, which basically supports soft tissues and stores minerals. For the muscular level, you have your skeletal muscles and your tendons, which helps in the locomotion and helps to maintain your posture. For the nervous system, you have brain, spinal cord, and it helps to direct responses to the stimuli. And you have your lymphatic system, wherein you have your lymphatic vessels and nodes, and it helps in our immunity or in our immune system. For the cardiovascular system, you have the heart, the blood vessels, and the blood, which helps to transport blood and that carries oxygen, nutrients, and waste. And you have your respiratory system, composed of your lungs and nasal cavities. These are just examples of the components, and it is involved in gaseous exchange. And then you have your endocrine system. You have your pancreas, pituitary gland, thyroid gland that helps to regulate growth, metabolism, and reproduction. You have your digestive system. Components are your stomach and intestine, helps to process food and absorb nutrients. Then you have our urinary system, where you have your kidneys and your bladder that regulates electrolytes and water and eliminates waste. Then we have reproductive system, wherein you have your testes and your ovaries for the production of offspring, and it produces milk. In this subject, we will be focusing more on the organ systems. So I'll just give you an overview at this point, wherein first we have our integumentary system. It provides protection, regulates temperature, prevent water loss, helps produce vitamin D, and consists of your skin, hair, nails, and sweat glands. So you have your hair and your skin. And then for the skeletal system, it helps to provide protection and support and allows body movements. It produces blood cells, stores minerals and fats, and consists of bones, associated cartilages, ligaments, and joints. And so as you can see from this photo, we have your skull, your clavicle, sternum, humerus, vertebral column, radius, ulna, then your femur, then you have your ribs, pelvis, tibia, and fibula. Now let's move to the muscular system. It produces body movements, maintains your posture, produces body heat, consists of muscles attached to the skeleton by tendons. So you have your temporalis, pectoralis major, then you have your biceps brachii, rectus abdominis, sartorius, quadriceps femoris, And then you have your gastrocnemius. Then for the lymphatic system, it basically removes foreign substances from the blood and the limbs. It combats disease, maintains tissue fluid balance, absorbs fat from the digestive tract, and consists of lymphatic vessels, lymph nodes, and other lymphatic organ. So as you can see from here, you have your tonsils, cervical lymph node, thymus, mammary plexus, thoracic duct, spleen, inguinal lymph node, then you have your axillary lymph node and your lymphatic vessels. Don't worry about this now. What I'm trying to do is to just give you an overview, and next time we will deep dive and understand each of these components. Then we have your respiratory system for the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide between the blood, and it regulates blood pH, consists of the lungs and respiratory passages. So as you can see from here, it starts with your nose, and then you have your nasal cavity, then you have your pharynx or your throat, and you have your larynx, then you have your trachea, bronchi, and your lungs. Then we have our digestive system, which helps to perform the mechanical and chemical processes of digestion, absorption of nutrients, elimination of waste, and it consists of the mouth, stomach, intestines, and accessory organs. So as you can see from here, you have your pharynx or your throat, and then you have your oral cavity or your mouth, then you have your salivary glands, then you have your esophagus, your stomach, your pancreas, small intestine, and large intestine. And on the side, you have your liver and your gallbladder. Then you have your appendix, rectum, and anus. For the nervous system, it is a major regulatory system that detects sensations. It controls the movements, physiological processes, and intellectual functions, and it consists of the brain, the spinal cord, nerves, and sensory receptors. So you have here your brain, spinal cord, nerve, cauda equina. Then we have here our endocrine system. It is a major regulatory system that influences metabolism, growth, reproduction, and many other functions. It consists of your glands, such as your pituitary gland, that secretes hormones. So down here, you have your hypothalamus, pituitary gland, pineal gland, and then you have your thyroid, and then you have your parathyroids, posterior part of thyroid. Then you have your thymus, adrenals, and then you have your pancreas, ovaries, and testes. Ovaries is for female and testes is for male. Cardiovascular system that helps to transport nutrients, waste products, gases, and hormones throughout the body. And it plays a role in the immune response and the regulation of body temperature. It consists of the heart, the blood vessels, and the blood. So you have here your carotid artery, then you have your jugular vein, then you have your superior vena cava, pulmonary trunk, heart, brachial artery, then you have your aorta, and you have your inferior vena cava and femoral artery and vein. Then for the urinary system, it helps to remove waste products from the blood, regulates blood pH, ion balance, and water balance. It consists of the kidneys, the urinary bladder, and ducts that carry urine. So down here you have your kidney, ureter, urinary bladder, and urethra. Then let's move to the reproductive system. Let's start with the female reproductive system. It produces oocytes and is the site of fertilization and fetal development. Produces milk for the newborn. Produces hormones that influence sexual functions and behaviors. and it is consists of the ovaries, vagina, uterus, mammary glands, and associated structures. Here in the photo, you have your mammary glands, which is in your breast, and then you have your uterine tube, ovary, uterus, and of course your vagina. For the male reproductive system, it produces and transports sperm cells to the female, and then it produces hormones that influence sexual functions and behaviors, and it is consist of the testes, accessory structures, ducts, and penis. So we have here on the right side your seminal vesicles, and then you have your prostate gland, testes, penis, and then you have your ductus deferens, then you have your epididymis. Let's move to homeostasis. Homeostasis came from the word homeo, which basically means the same, and stasis, which literally means staying. What it does is to maintain a relatively constant environment within the body. It is usually within a narrow normal range and fluctuating around a set point. And so as you can see from here, we have our body temperature, which is at normal range, set at 37 degrees Celsius. And then below, we have our temperature badge that shows 36.5. So my temperature at that point was below the normal range. Remember that our cells require relatively constant environment to function properly. And so our body has to maintain its internal environment against a constant fluctuating external environment. Deviations from homeostasis can lead to malfunction of cells and even cell death. Homeostasis is typically maintained by feedback mechanisms. So what are feedback mechanisms? We have the negative feedback and we also have the positive feedback. And the components of a feedback mechanism, we have our sensors or our receptors, which is a component of a feedback system that monitors a physiological value. And then we have a control center, example would be our brain. This is a component of a feedback system that compares the value to the normal range. And then we have the effector, example would be our sweat glands. It is a component in a feedback system that causes a change to reverse the situation and return the value to the normal range. And then down here we have our negative feedback mechanism. It's a mechanism that reverses a deviation from the set point, and it maintains body parameters within its normal range, and it goes on throughout the body at all times. Now let's look at the negative feedback loop. We start with the stimulus, and then the stimulus will give a signal to the sensor, and then from the sensor it will move to the control center and then to the effector. And it goes into a loop. From the effector, it will send the signal again to the stimulus, and it goes on and on. Then let's move to our example, body temperature regulation. A while ago, in the photo that I've shown you, the temperature is lower than normal. Normal setting is 37 degrees Celsius and it was 36.5. While in our case, in our current example, body temperature exceeds 37 degrees Celsius. Let's just say 37.8 degrees Celsius. And then what happens next is that your nerve cells in the skin and the brain will sense that the temperature is higher than normal. Then what your body will do is to regulate the temperature by sending a signal to your brain throughout the day to adjust and regulate the temperature so that it goes back to the normal temperature, and it goes round and round. Then we have our positive feedback mechanism. The system responds by making the variable deviate further from the normal value as the response occurs in the same direction as the initial disturbance. Positive feedback does not maintain homeostasis and rarely occur in healthy individuals. An example would be childbirth and the body's response to blood loss. You have a positive feedback loop that are normal but are activated only when needed. An example would be head of a baby pushes against the cervix, and then your nerve impulses from the cervix is transmitted to the brain. Then your brain stimulates pituitary gland to secrete oxytocin. And oxytocin is carried in the bloodstream to the uterus. And then oxytocin stimulates uterine contractions and pushes the baby towards the cervix. And it goes round and round until the mother's bundle of joy comes out. The standard body map or your anatomical position is like in the photo wherein the man is standing upright, feet at shoulder width and parallel, and the toes are facing forward. That I would like to introduce two directional terms. On the left side, you have anterior, where the man is facing in front, and then the right photo, we have a posterior, wherein the man is facing at the back. We have more directional terms here. In this photo, you have the superior, which is basically an arrow that shows above, and then inferior is the direction that actually shows going down or below. Then we learned about anterior a while ago, which is just facing in front, and then posterior is facing at the back. Then you have proximal, which is close to the point of attachment, and then you have distal, which means it is far from the point of attachment. Then you also have superficial, which means close to the surface, and deep, which is towards the interior of your body. Don't be confused of these terms. I will be giving you examples and a summary later. And then we have here the supine, which is a horizontal position with face oriented up. Then we have prone, a horizontal position, or you are just basically lying down with your face oriented down. And then you have your right lateral recumbent, which is a horizontal position with right side oriented down. And then you have your left lateral recumbent. You are in horizontal position with left side oriented down. And there are other common positions that including Trendelenburg's and Fowler's position. Here is a summary of the anatomical terms. We have the terms, and then next will be etymology, and then your definition. I believe you already know where is your right and where is your left. When you are directing towards the body's right side, and you are directing to the body's left side, that is self-explanatory, so you can just say the right ear or the left ear. But when you say inferior and superior, inferior basically means lower, and then superior means higher. Inferior means lower or below, and then the nose, you can just say the nose is inferior to the forehead. And then superior means higher or above, wherein you can say our mouth is superior to the chin. And then for anterior and posterior, anterior means to go before or towards the front of the body. Remember a while ago, it's facing in front. So the teeth are anterior to the throat. Posterior from the word posterus, which literally means following. You are basically directing towards the back of the body. So the brain is posterior to the eyes. Then you have dorsal and ventral from the word dorsum, which literally means the back. And then for ventral came from the word venter, which means belly. Dorsal is just another word for saying posterior, and ventral is another word for anterior. So basically, dorsal is another term that you can actually use to replace posterior, and then ventral is another term that you can actually use to replace anterior. Okay? So the spine is dorsal to the breastbone, and your navel is ventral to the spine. Then you have proximal and distal. All this etymology is either Latin or Greek word, okay? So we have proximus, which literally means nearest, and then for distal, it's a combination of the words die plus sto, so it means to be distant. When it is closer to the point of attachment, you can say the elbow is proximal to the wrist. But when it is far or farther from a point of attachment, you can say the knee is distal to the hip. Alright, so then you have your lateral and medial from the word latus or side, and then medialis, which means middle. When your body part is away from the midline, you're referring to lateral. When it is towards the middle or midline of the body, you are referring to the medial term. Okay, so the nipple is lateral to the breastbone, and the bridge of the nose is medial to the eye. You can either describe something as superficial or deep. From the word superficialis or surface, and then dio, which literally means deep. So when it is toward or on the surface, that is superficial. The skin is superficial to the muscle. When it is away from the surface or internal, the lungs are deep to the ribs. Then you can say deep. Alright? The anatomical term is deep. All directional terms refer to a human in the anatomical position. So don't be confused when you describe something. Just remember that the standard is your anatomical position. Then we have our body cavities. Our bodies has many cavities that contain and protect delicate internal organs. Some are open to the outside of the body, just like here you have in the photo, you have your nasal cavity. Some are open to the outside of the body, just like your nasal cavity, and some are not open to the outside of the body. In our photo, down here we have our thoracic cavity, abdominal cavity, pelvic cavity, pericardial cavity, pleural cavity, and another example will be your peritoneal cavity. Now let's move to the thoracic cavity, composed of your heart, lungs, thymus gland, esophagus, and trachea. Then you now have your abdominal cavity, composed of your stomach, intestines, liver, spleen, pancreas, and kidneys. Next, you have your pelvic cavity, composed of your urinary bladder, reproductive organs, part of the large intestine. And then you have your pericardial cavity, which is around the heart. And then you have your pleural cavity, which is around your lungs. And then next, you have your peritoneal cavity or peritoneal cavity around abdominopelvic cavity. Answer. Now, let me check on whether you know the answer to these questions. Okay, question 1. Our navel is located in the blank side of the body. And then question 2. I'd like you to identify the type of mechanism when the level of insulin will rise under certain conditions but will soon drop to normal level in the presence of another hormone called glucagon. This process typically occurs throughout the day. Check your answer whether you got it right or wrong. For number 1, our navel is located in the anterior side of the body. Remember, navel is the belly button and it is on the front side of the body. So that is in anterior. And then for question 2, it's a negative feedback because the level of insulin rises and then falls, or it fluctuates all day long. It is called negative feedback mechanism. So I hope that at this point you can now define anatomy and physiology, and then you can discuss the levels of organization in living organisms. Then you can state various organ systems and their functions. Then you can now describe the mechanism of homeostasis. And now you can list anatomical terms to describe body sections, body regions, and body cavities. Thank you so much, and I'll see you again next time.